Hey, what's up, everyone? Very much welcome to the podcast. We've missed each other last week, so apologies about that. But we're glad to be back. Today, I am flying solo, so I'll have to get used to not having somebody to bounce some ideas and thoughts off of. But I'm hoping that you guys will also interact and engage. So before I get to the topic of the podcast, I just want to read a quick introduction to everybody so that those who are watching that doesn't know exactly what this is about, that you have a better idea, of what you can expect. So welcome to the MyRehab Cafe video podcast. The MyRehab Cafe private and unsearchable Facebook group is the aftercare branch of the MyRehab group of dual diagnosis addiction centers, or ARC, as it was formerly known as. The MyRehab centers are private inpatient drug and alcohol rehab centers that offer high-quality healthcare with high-quality outcomes. The MyRehab Cafe Facebook group has exclusive access to loads of content that isn't available on any of the MyRehab public channels. Some of the content includes workshops, lectures, and support groups hosted in conjunction with some of the treating providers at the MyRehab inpatient centers, such as myself. These treating providers are psychologists, social workers, wellness counselors, and volunteers who have extensive experience in the field. Group members also participate in movie and books reviews, and from time to time, face-to-face events. If you aren't a member of the MyRehab Cafe, you are likely watching this on a public channel. This means that you will only unfortunately have 10 to 20 minutes of access to this live broadcast before we switch over exclusively to the private and unsearchable MyRehab Cafe Facebook group. Remember to sign up and join the MyRehab Cafe, guys, as this is where the interesting part of the live videos happen. MyRehab Cafe is free to any person that has been through the MyRehab inpatient process. If you haven't been through the inpatient process, but you want to find out how to join the MyRehab Cafe, please check out the MyRehab Cafe website, which is www.myrehab.com. If you want to participate in this workshop, please join in via video or audio via the link in the comments section. Or leave a comment and I should be able to bring it on screen. And my guest and I, well, don't have a guest today, but maybe next time, I will then be able to see what we can do about answering any questions you may have. If you are a MyRehab Cafe member and you want a higher degree of anonymity or confidentiality, then please wait for us to end the broadcast on the public channels before hopping on or posting. I'll make an announcement when we're switching over. With that, let's get it started. So again, welcome everybody. This podcast is weekly. It's every Tuesday at 12, and we basically discuss interpersonal dynamics and relationships in recovery. So we take a look at how to navigate difficulties and challenges in relationships post-recovery. And I think we felt that there was a need for that, as we have lots of patients that tell us on a daily basis how they struggle after rehab, to manage some of their relationship difficulties and conflicts and issues. So every week we've been discussing different topics, and of late, I think the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been working through some worksheets. The last podcast that we did, like I said, last week we didn't have a podcast, and the week before we were online. We unfortunately had a bit of technical difficulties, specifically with regards to load shedding, which means that really affected our internet connection and our sound as well. So we did experience some technical difficulties. So at the end of the day, I thought it would be beneficial if we just retake a look at the worksheet that we did last time. I feel there is really valuable content in it. And at the end of the day, I don't want anybody to have missed out. And I'm very sure that some people logged off because it was a little bit difficult, specifically for me and Ryan, to hear one another and understand, what we were engaging on. So I'm going to ask Kirsty, she has the worksheet there for us. Kirsty, if you could maybe just enlarge it for me a little bit so that I can see it a bit better. Thank you. And just scroll up, please, so I can get to the yes. All right. So this worksheet is an individualized homework planner. The nice thing about this, and I'm very sure that Ryan will put a link up for you guys to be able to download the worksheet. Otherwise, you can just make notes as we go through. This worksheet is beneficial because it gives you a practical tool that you can use over a couple of weeks, and that you can also track and monitor your process and your progress as you go through this specific activity. So it's not a once-off thing that you read through. It is something that you continuously work on. And I think that, for a lot of the patients that do experience success in their recovery, they would say it's these type of things that keeps them accountable. They actively try and spend a couple of minutes or at least half an hour or so per day on their recovery, working through things like this. Why? Because it just makes you take stock of where you're at in your recovery, and it as well obviously helps you to identify some possible pitfalls or struggles that you might even encounter in the future. So, okay, I'm just going to read a little bit off of the worksheet. So sorry that my gaze will be diverting to this side. So it's basically, it reads, how independent am I? So what does independence mean to you? And how independent should you be? American culture tends to teach us unrealistic and unhealthy things about the subject. Men may have been taught that they should be able to handle any problem without help or emotional support. And women may have been taught that it's not feminine to be strong and they should be dependent on somebody, or they should allow somebody to take care of them. Neither attitude makes sense. Human beings are independent. We all need to be somewhat able to solve our own problems. But also we need to be able to get help when something is too big for us, like overcoming an addiction. So I'm not going to go. Last week or the week before, we spent a lot of time talking about the dynamics in terms of males and females and self-reliance. So we're going to steer a little bit away from that today, and we're going to look a little bit more practically at, what is the degree of a healthy level of independence? And I think I mentioned that the other day, to say it's difficult when you are straight and fresh out of rehab to really determine what you are able to handle and take on, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with too much responsibility too soon, but you also don't want to err too far on the side of caution and take no responsibility and fall back into old patterns of boredom and laziness that might trigger some cravings and a relapse in any way. So the worksheet kind of starts to say that this exercise will help you to figure out your own balance between independence and relying on others. So the first question they ask is, do you feel you are too dependent on others, too independent, or do you feel you're about right? So obviously we do know about people being overly reliant on other individuals, and I think if we talk about reliance, we need to think in terms of financially, relationship-wise, emotionally. But then there's also the risk of being too independent and not allowing yourself to rely on anybody for a level of support, which can also be dangerous at the end of the day. So what the worksheet is asking you to ascertain is to say, do you feel you might be too reliant on other individuals and too dependent, that you struggle to stand on your own 2 feet, or you struggle to manage your daily responsibilities, or you kind of fall to the other extremity where you might be too independent and you might struggle with vulnerability, to show vulnerability, to let other people help you, to let other people support you. So like I said, that can also be a risk. So, Kusi, if you can go down a little bit to number 2, where it says, list the 5 things. That's perfect. Thank you. List the 5 things that you can think of that you routinely do for yourself without anyone's help. And they give you examples there, such as paying bills, transportation, cooking, keeping appointments. So there is obviously certain activities on a daily basis that you should be able to manage by yourself. The other day I mentioned on the group where I said, at some point in my life, it was difficult for me to make my own appointments. I would rather prefer my mom to pick up the phone and make the appointments. But at the end of the day, at some point she said, but, Lario, I'm not always going to be around. And at some point you're going to have to take the lead to be able to, schedule your own appointments, because should something come up or should life happen, you need to actually be able to reschedule that appointment or postpone the appointment. So That's just a very simple example, and I think we can make it today a little bit more practical in terms of in terms of rehab and your recovery process. So maybe if we look at something like scheduling your appointments with your psychologist or your psychiatrist, that is something that is maybe beneficial for you to do, is so that you take the lead on your own mental health to say, what, it's important for me that I make sure I get to my appointments. So I'm going to book my appointments. I'm going to keep a diary. I'm going to make sure that I either make payment myself or I inform the person that's maybe helping me out with the payment options prior to the appointment, so that I'm going to make sure that I'm on time, because generally they ask you to be at those appointments a couple of minutes earlier. So that might be, let's say, step one in your recovery, is to say, maybe a responsibility I can take is to make sure I make my own appointments with my mental health professionals. Another example could be, where do I find and how do I slot into support group meetings? It can be the MyRehab Cafe, it can be other initiatives. I think at the end of the day, specifically in rehab, they will generally tell you where you can find those resources. They might give you a link or a phone number, but speaking from my own private practice, a lot of the times checking in with patients a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after rehab, they will tell me they haven't gotten around to it yet. They haven't slotted into any aftercare program. And when I ask them why, they often tell me, but I'm not sure where to find the right support, and I'm not sure how to initiate that support. And then when we ask, but, were you given a phone number or a list they say, yes, I have, but, I've been kind of avoiding it a little bit. It feels awkward for me to go to a group meeting by myself or to slot in online, and give an opinion. So that might also be something that a person can take responsibility for, is to say, it's my recovery. I need to manage it. So I need to act proactively as soon as possible. Pick up the phone around, send emails. Most of those websites are very user-friendly, and make use of social media like this one. And that might also be something on the self-reliance part that a person can then look at. Other things might be medication, is to make sure that you go and fill your scripts at the right time, that you don't miss any of your medication. To also make sure, like I said, with the follow-ups with the psychiatrist or the GP or whomever is prescribing the medication, that you can give them feedback on how you're managing those. Other examples could also be maybe working through your step work, if that, or these worksheets as an example, is that it doesn't become somebody else's responsibility to remind you, but it's something that you take responsibility of yourself and act proactively to say, what, I don't have to start too big too soon. I can maybe tell myself 3 times a week for a half an hour, I'm going to sit with my books or my homework or whatever, and I'm going to go through it and really work through those things. So those are just small examples in terms of how one can maybe go and say, I should be able to list at least 5 things, specifically in terms of my recovery, that I am managing on my own, that I am able to do by myself. Question number 3 then says, now list the significant things that you rely on others to help you with or do for you, or that they should do for you. So now it's looking at the other part to say, what, maybe there are a few things that I'm finding too difficult to manage by myself, just fresh out of rehab. So I'm going to give examples, practical examples. A parent might say, prior to rehab, I was fetching or dropping off the kids at school on a daily basis. And now that I'm out of rehab, I would love to take that responsibility back, because I want to spend time with my kids. Lots of parents say driving their kids from school and back, they learn a lot about their kids, because their kids are talking and moaning, discussing everything about their day. So they don't want to miss out on that time. But maybe the person is also looking for a job, or is currently managing their group or their therapy support group sessions. And they might say, what, let us start small. Maybe, you can still help me with fetching the kids twice in a week or 3 times a week. And I will then drive, the other 2 or 3 days. So that it's something that you are relying on somebody else for, but you're not exclusively making it their responsibility. You are sharing responsibility. And I think that's kind of what it's saying, is that it's significant things that you rely on others for. So it's not just your average daily response, small little things like making appointments and so forth. It might be bigger things, like I said, like dropping kids or picking kids up from school. Maybe things like getting your SASSA grant or paying certain bills. Some people might find that extremely anxiety provoking in the beginning. So they might say, you know what, I want to learn how to budget. So I'm going to see what my total income is, wherever that income might come from. And I'm going to draw up a budget, but please may I request your help in terms of helping me pay those bills, or helping go with me to the SASSA offices in the beginning to make sure that, I'm able to get my SASSA grant on time. So that might be, again, asking for help with things that might be a little bit bigger than the everyday duties or responsibilities. So those, I think, is important as well, because you need to differentiate whether you are asking for help and for support, or whether you're kind of exclusively making a responsibility somebody else's responsibility. So it's one thing to ask for some support and for some guidance, in terms of certain bigger things, but it also won't necessarily be beneficial to say, you know what, I'm just opting out. I just don't feel that I can manage it at this time. I'm going to step out and just let other people take on that responsibility. So an example of that might be, a person comes out of rehab and they might be unemployed, and now they are not able to pay their bills. And instead of actively seeking a job and maybe updating their CV and dropping off their CV or emailing their CV to different places or going for interviews, they kind of take the stance of saying, I'm not able to have a job now, so I'm going to just take some time off. But then the person who is paying the bills then becomes exclusively responsible for that. So it's a very fine line in terms of, like I said, whether you're asking for support or exclusively making it somebody else's baby. Then number 4 says, of the items you listed for question 3, which do you feel you will always need others to help you with? So I think this is kind of where it's alluding to the fact, is this a temporary support or guidance that you're asking for? Or is this something long-term that, the family and maybe even your company or colleagues or whatever needs to adjust to? Obviously, like the example I just gave is the finances, so somebody might say, please, I need some assistance with paying for my medication or for my, therapy, or whichever the case might be. But at the end of the day, it is temporary, because I am planning on getting a job and helping you pay those bills eventually. Other more permanent help might be, I'm trying to think of an example, might be to say, okay, I might struggle with cravings for the inevitable future. It might lessen in its intensity and frequency, but at the end of the day, I might need some help with dealing with my cravings for a longer time than just a few weeks or a few months. So somebody might then ask and say, you know what, can I ask your support that when we are at a braai or when we, at a function, and I feel like I'm not coping and I'm having intense cravings, that I can rely on you to assist me with that. And like I said, that might be a more long-term support that you might require. So guys, I do see that our time is unfortunately up on the private channel. So we're going to move over to the MyRehab Cafe private group. For those who wants to join, please make sure that you sign up on the MyRehab Cafe group, the private unsearchable Facebook group. So we're going to switch over there. But thanks so much for whomever was watching, and hopefully we'll see you next week again. And then the rest that are on the group, I will see you on the other side. Okay, thanks. So you can move over to the other group.